The story opens with our protagonist at a funeral narrating that he has always hated his father. He explained that throughout his life, he always found himself constantly hoping for his father's death. And today his prayers were finally answered. His father actually died. And he remarked mockingly that a heart attack got him. He didn't feel bad about his father's death because he was a criminal, a womanizer, and a greedy scumbag. And because of his father's reputation, our protagonist had a troubled life, so making friends or having a girlfriend was out of the question for him. However, he added that his father did do one good thing for him after dying. The next day, after cleaning his apartment and taking out the trash, our protagonist started thinking about his father, and he wondered if maybe he knew his death was approaching. But as he thought about it, he quickly concluded that he shouldn't. He opened his curtains, exclaiming that the morning sunlight is shining through the curtains. Then he shifted his gaze to the student who was making her way to school, and the worker who was heading to work. He looked at them with a sorrowful look, stating that they have to go to hell. Then he grabbed his morning cup of coffee, remarking that now because of his old man he can just stand here watching others go to work while drinking his coffee. After taking a sip, he clenched his fist, shouting bingo. Then he lifted his hands in the air and he cheered with a blissful smile on his face, and he expressed that he can live out the rest of his life as a NEET. A NEET is someone not in education, employment, or training. Basically a bum, and the reason why our protagonist could now live out the rest of his life as a NEET is because his old man had a secret fortune laying around. In the basement of their house was 500 million yen. After cheering, he sat down, and with a smug expression he spoke out loud, saying maybe his old man wasn't all bad, since in the end he acted like a truly great father. The protagonist couldn't help but rejoice again because with this much money he could do and buy whatever he wanted. Whether it be a house, a car, or women, he could get them all. But he wasn't really interested in those kinds of things, and as he thought about what he was really after, a devilish grin appeared on his face. His fantasies were interrupted by a knock on his door. He swiftly turned to the door in excitement, like a kid on Christmas morning, and he shouted that it's here. He opened the door, and before the delivery man could say anything, our protagonist took the package inside and shut the door in the delivery man's face. Inside, the protagonist jumped on his bed shouting yay, and as he relaxed he thought about how he finally ordered everything he needed for his dream bedroom, which cost a total of 30 million yen. However, by his position on his bed it was clear that he didn't care about the cost since he had more than enough money. He snuggled with his pillow, and he recalled the 3 vows he made to himself, which were to not work, to not have friends, and to never get married. Work was an absolute no, and he may sound like a privileged piece of trash, but work was a no for him. Having friends meant being in a constant battle of one-upping each other, and he couldn't think of anything more annoying than that. And then there was marriage. Vowing to spend the rest of your life with someone you love is just an annoyance, and plus he wouldn't want to cheat on his right hand. Jokes aside, the true reason he avoided marriage is because his scumbag father made that same vow no less than 12 times. His perception of marriage was then broken, and he didn't want to repeat his father's mistakes. So he will live out the rest of his life playing games on his comfy bed, which was his definition of paradise. Our protagonist turned his attention to the TV, and expressed that with that out of the way it was time for him to play the games that had been piling up. He shouted that he has to complete them all no matter what. 2 months later, our protagonist finished the first game on his list, Dungeon Break. However, it took him some time, which was reflected by the state of his room. However, he ignored the trash that had piled up, and instead turned his attention to the other games, questioning if he should try a VR game next. His game searching was interrupted by a notification from his TV. He turned to the TV questioning what it could be. On the game interface, a prompt that read "You have one new message" had appeared. Our protagonist was taken aback. He questioned why he was receiving a message when he didn't have a single friend in the game. He opened the message, and the message read, "Thank you for completing Dungeon Break. We, the creators, are very happy that you played until the end." Realizing that the message was from the creators, our protagonist laid down in his bed, and he questioned if they were trying to use flattery to get the user to buy more of their stuff. He remarked games are made by ordinary office workers too, and since they must have put countless hours into the game, he praised them for doing a good job. Then another message was sent to him, asking if he would like to take some time to complete a survey. Our protagonist was surprised, and he pondered why the creators were suddenly asking him to take a survey. He decided to take the survey, and the first question asked him to choose between cute girls or mature girls. Our protagonist wondered what kind of question this was, however he decided to just go with it and pick one. The next question was also weird. It asked him if he gets excited when people hit him, or if he gets excited when he hits people. Our protagonist continued to disappointedly answer the questions, however he quickly got overwhelmed by the questions. Each question was weirder than the previous one, and it started to creep him out. Finally, he was asked what seemed to be the final question, which was asking him if he knew how the world Dungeon Break ends. Our protagonist thought this was a stupid question since he just completed the game. He checked yes, and another message appeared asking him if he would be able to change the world's ending. This further creeped our protagonist out. He threw his game controller to the side, questioning if this was some kind of fake messaging to scam players. He concluded that the game was probably going to ask him for money next. Then he remarked that you really can't trust anything in this damn world, and he was glad that he didn't fall for the scam. As he said this, a cockroach moved across his TV stand. Seeing the cockroach made our protagonist jump, and he accidentally clicked a button on his controller, checking yes on the message. And suddenly the TV began to glow a blinding light, and shortly after our protagonist disappeared along with the light. In the darkness of his mind, our protagonist could hear someone breathing heavily. He started to panic, questioning what the hell was happening. When he gained his sight, he looked down at his hand and was left shocked because they were not his hands. And suddenly he was hit with a wave of pain. He grabbed and squeezed his stomach, desperately questioning why he was hurting so much. His attention was then drawn to the footsteps of a group of men who were approaching him. One of the men looked down on our protagonist with a smug look, and he asked him to spit it out. Our protagonist was taken aback, and he wondered who these people were. The same man asked him with a distorted expression for the location of the treasure. He continued to look down at our protagonist along with his fellow men. Then, referring to our protagonist as Demon Lord, he asked him if he wanted them to hurt him even more. Our protagonist looked up, questioning what treasure they were talking about and who the Demon Lord they keep referring to is. He pondered if maybe they were talking about him. He looked around what seemed to be a cave, and he questioned where he was and what was happening to him. His memories were messed up. The only thing he remembered was that a second ago he was in his room playing games. But he couldn't remember anything before that or the game he was playing. And now suddenly he was in an injured body with a group of men looking at him with a murderous aura. Our protagonist decided to forget about trying to get answers to his questions, and to instead focus on doing something about this situation. However, he turned to his leg, noting that his whole body has been injured, and with his leg broken like this, there's no way he could run away from these people. In fact, the pain from his injuries was making it difficult to think. He gritted his teeth, and he tried to calm himself down so he would be able to think of the best way to get out of this mess. He called out to the group of men, his voice breaking as he spoke, and he begged them to please wait. Right now what he needed most was clues, and he thought he could get those clues by talking to these people, so he asked why they were referring to him as Demon Lord. The man from earlier, who seemed to be the leader of this group, grabbed our protagonist by the horns, causing him great discomfort, and he smugly asked him if he finally lost it after getting beaten up. With a smile, he told our protagonist that his horn was weeping, and he called him Demon Lord Dantalia. That name sounded very familiar, and our protagonist quickly remembered where he heard it before. He remembered that before he was in this mess he was playing an RPG game where the heroes go on a journey to defeat the Demon Lords. The game was called Dungeon Break, and it is a fantasy game where you have to save the world by fighting against numerous Demon Lords. It was insanely difficult, and he died again and again. And the story of the game was so depressing that the sole ending is the collapse of the world. And as for Dantalian, he is the trash of the 72 Demon Kings, ranked 71st in the rankings. He is the second weakest, and the first one to be defeated by the heroes. His other memories started flooding into his brain, and he finally remembered how he ended up in this situation, and he concluded that he must be in the world of Dungeon Break. And as he came to this realization, his eyes widened. Then he started sweating nervously as he further realized that he was now the second weakest Demon Lord in the game. His heart started racing as he panicked, and he questioned how all this is even possible. However, as he thought about it, his current injured state started making sense, and if he really was Dantalian now, then this situation was worse beyond what he could ever imagine. The leader of the bandits was starting to get annoyed. He called out to Dantalian, snapping him out of his daze, and after Dantalian looked up to him, he punched him on the cheek, causing him to fly backwards. Dantalian crashed to the floor and he started coughing, desperately grasping for air. As he laid there, he came to the conclusion that if this continues, then he is going to get killed. The leader of the bandits turned to the others and he ordered them to deal with Dantalian since he doesn't seem to be ready to give them what they needed. The other bandits rejoiced, and they proceeded to punch Dantalian around. As he was being punched, kicked, and stomped around, Dantalian questioned if this was some kind of joke. After finally being free from the curse of his crappy father, he thought he could finally live a comfortable life, but here he was on the verge of death. The beating caused him to slowly lose his consciousness, and as his consciousness faded, he saw a figure sitting in a chair some distance away. The figure drew closer, and Dantalian realized that it was his father, who was laughing at him. This angered Dantalian, and he questioned why his father was laughing when he had to suffer so much because of him. Then he remembered that something like this happened to him before. In the past, he was kidnapped by someone who had a grudge against his father, and as he was being taken to the holding site, Dantalian was strangely calm. This really creeped the kidnapper out, but unbeknownst to him, Dantalian had finally reached his limit, and this time he just let it happen and decided to stay calm. And so when they arrived at the holding site, Dantalian made a bet. The kidnapper tied Dantalian up, and afterwards he pointed a gun at him, and he threatened him, saying if he made a fuss he would kill him. Dantalian, who had made a bet to see if he could free himself from his father, looked up at the kidnapper and he asked him to shoot him. The kidnapper was taken aback and he questioned if Dantalian was being serious. Dantalian, who saw it as a win if the gun was real and a loss if it was fake since he would be at the mercy of his father, reached forth his hand and he grabbed hold of the gun and he brought it up to his forehead. The kidnapper let go of the gun and he stumbled backwards and he nervously questioned if Dantalian was some kind of demon child. At the end of the incident, the kidnapper surrendered himself and Dantalian lost his bet. But it wasn't all bad, because he came to understand that the ones who survive in the end are the ones whose resolve is stronger, but that had completely slipped his mind due to his current situation, and in the present the bandit leader told him that this was his last chance. He approached him, and while stepping on him, he asked for the treasure. Dantalian noted that he had died once already, then he clenched his fist and he decided to shape this whole situation to something that would benefit him using nothing but his resolve. The bandit leader was further annoyed by Dantalian's silence. He asked Dantalian if he was really going to take his treasure to hell with him. Dantalian remained silent, so the bandit leader snapped his fingers. And as a giant of a man, carrying a giant mallet, approached, the bandit leader told Dantalian that he should know that he isn't a very patient man. The giant mallet man asked the bandit leader if he was sure that he wanted him to kill Dantalian before getting the whereabouts of the treasure. The bandit leader exclaimed with a grin that it wouldn't matter since they should be able to find the treasure later, and he ordered the mallet man to kill Dantalian. The mallet man lifted his mallet in the air. As he did this, he told Dantalian that he can go and regret not telling them where the treasure is in the afterlife. The mallet man swung his giant mallet, and Dantalian lifted his hand, and he shouted that he would do it. The mallet man stopped his swing. Dantalian, who had resolved himself to survive no matter what, stood, and he told the bandits that he will tell them where the treasure is. The mallet man started laughing, and he expressed that it seems Dantalian had finally given up. He remarked that if they go get the treasure quickly and then present Dantalian's head, the people of the town will be singing their praises. Dantalian was able to stop his death for the moment. However, he didn't even know if there was a treasure here to begin with, and he knew that if he pointed the bandits in a random direction they would kill him without a moment of hesitation. He decided that his first move should be to get through this by buying himself some more time. Then he knelt on the ground, and with his head lowered he announced that he had been completely and utterly defeated, and he told the bandits that the treasure they were seeking was in the Demon Lord's chamber. However, he said that the treasure is hidden with magic, and the only one who can undo that magic is him. After saying this, Dantalian lifted his head slightly, and he glared at the bandits, questioning if they would believe that. The leader of the bandits called out to him, and as he looked up, the leader of the bandits struck his blade in the ground, almost splitting Dantalian's face in two. Then he glared down at him, and he told him that they will follow along with him. However, if Dantalian was lying to them, he would kill him on the spot. With a grin, Dantalian lifted his head up slightly, and as a drop of sweat dripped down his face, he expressed that he understood. The bandit leader turned to the others, and he asked them if they heard what Dantalian just said. Then he repeated what Dantalian said, and the bandits started cheering and laughing. Dantalian observed quietly, noting that he managed to overcome the first obstacle. However, he knows that the real battle is just now starting. He has ensured that the bandits won't kill him right away. However, that's only until they get to the Demon Lord's chamber. And as the bandits prepared to head to the Demon Lord's chamber, he glared at them, and he started thinking of what his next plan should be. As the bandits started walking, Dantalian was still immersed in his thoughts. The bandit king looked back and he ordered Dantalian to walk faster so he could catch up to them. Dantalian apologized for slowing them down, and he started walking as fast as he could, but his injured leg was getting in the way. This annoyed the bandit leader. He shouted at him, questioning if he was trying to stall for time, and he told him that if he didn't pick up the pace he would kill him. Dantalian increased his pace, and as he walked, he observed that with the way things are going, sooner or later he was going to get killed. The pain from stepping on his injured leg started to wear him down. However, the bandits paid him no mind, and as he walked desperately trying to catch his breath, Dantalian started looking for ways to somehow kill the bandits before they killed him. However, he noted that the situation was looking hopeless. He looked forward, counting that there were 10 bandits who were all armed, and there was no way he could face them when he was injured. He looked to the left and right, searching for anything that he could use. In his search he realized that right now they were inside Dantalian's castle, meaning there should be at least one monster left that he could use. So he desperately started searching around for signs of monsters. However, this slowed his pace, and the bandit leader noticed. He turned, and he called out, asking him to hurry up. After Dantalian picked up the pace, they went on and the bandit leader glanced back, and he decided not to give Dantalian too much of a hard time since they were going to kill him when they got the treasure anyway. Some time later, the group had been walking for a while, but the only thing Dantalian could see was the remains of monsters, and none of them were fresh. This made him conclude that he can't rely on the crappy demon lord he regressed into. He can only rely on himself. And as they continued on to the demon lord's chamber, he questioned how much longer he had until they arrived. He started sweating nervously because if this was anything like the game, then it shouldn't be long. But as he said this, a thought came to mind. This was a game world, meaning he should be able to use that. With a devilish grin, he spoke, saying Eye of Zeus, and a map and description of Dantalian's castle was shown to him. Eye of Zeus is one of the skills in Dungeon Break, and as the name suggests, it allows the player to see their current location, enemy positions, items, and traps within the dungeon. It's a high-level skill, normally only available starting from the middle point of the game, but there was one place where players could use it in the early game, and that was during the first tutorial dungeon that adventurers visit to learn the game mechanics, inside Dantalian's castle. Until now he believed that regressing into Dantalian's body was a curse, and he didn't expect that it would end up being useful in this way. Dantalian turned his attention to the description of his castle, and as he thought, the message showed that there were 0 troops. Suddenly he received a message from the system, stating that the current number of troops in his castle was 0. The system warned him that this is extremely dangerous, and it advised him to hire troops immediately. Dantalian was taken aback as he read the message. Afterwards, a prompt labeled Contract with Hades appeared in front of him. The prompt asked him to choose between 4 monsters he would like to hire. The first was a slime monster with F in strength, F in attack, E in defense, and it would cost 4 libra. The second was a lesser fairy. This monster had F in strength, E in attack, F in defense, and it would cost 8 libra. Third was a goblin soldier with E in strength, E in attack, and F in defense, and it would cost 12 libra. Last was a lesser golem with D in strength, D in attack, and C in defense, and it would cost 20 libra. Dantalian's grin grew, and as sweat dripped down his face. He questioned if demon lords really have a skill that allows them to hire monsters. And as he observed the interface, he noticed something that was concerning. He only had 100 libra, the currency of the Dungeon Break game. He scratched his head, wondering what this useless demon lord was up to before he possessed his body. Dantalian started coming up with strategies. He first thought about using 8 goblins to take on the 10 bandits. However, that would still be a hard battle with his current condition, so he threw that idea away. And he instead started looking at the golem. He questioned if he should get a golem and launch a surprise attack. However, he quickly realized that there is no guarantee that he would win. And as they drew closer to his chambers, he grew more desperate. He took turns looking at the map, then at the list of monsters he could hire, and an idea finally came to mind. He nervously calculated that his chance of success was only at 60%, which was too low for him to risk his life, but in thinking this he turned to the bandits. And he quickly realized that he had no other choice. He clenched his fist, and he started plotting his next move. For this plan he first needed to gain the bandits' trust. But before that there's something he wanted to know. Then he quietly said the words Apostle of Aphrodite, and the status windows of the bandits appeared above their heads. With a devilish grin, Dantalian started chuckling quietly, since he could see the bandit's status window from start to end. Out of the corner of his eye, the bandit leader noticed that Dantalian's pace had slowed again. He pointed his sword at him, and he shouted for him to walk faster. With his head lowered, Dantalian apologized sincerely, however with a grin. He noted that the counterattack begins now. You made it to the end of the video. If you want to see more, then hit the like button. Also, while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe.